I think we got this working. Yeah. What's going on, everybody? What's going on? Welcome, welcome.
Welcome back to Lore Drop Live. I'm DnDWife.
And I'm DM Eguile. Tonight we're diving into one of my favorite parts of character creation, the looks.
Ooh, and that's right. We are from the weapons to the sewing, to the clothes, everything, the armor, to the little details, and so much personality. A sword isn't just a sword. It's a part of who your character is. You want to make sure you're adding all those details.
And remember, my golden rule is always, flavor is always free. How your character presents themselves visually, stylistically, dramatically, it all helps your table see who they are before you've even rolled initiative.
So grab your sketchbooks and your minis, or just your imagination. And let's talk about bringing characters to life through looks and style.
So let's jump into it. So obviously, if you guys are first joining us, welcome. Thank you for joining us. This is Lore Drop Live, where we discuss everything Dungeons and Dragons. And what we've been doing these last few episodes is we've been talking specifically character creation. Given the fact that before you can even really start your story, you got to really know how to build that character. And we've gone over a few things, whether it's, talking about the backgrounds of your character and how that shapes them, to going into looking at like how you can manage your statistics and role play based off of that. But we figured we'd talk about the next, I think, important topic for any character is the looks.
Ooh, the swag.
Right. And the way I proposed this to D&D was this idea of like, there's nothing more exciting, I think, for a player. Now, obviously, I don't get to be a player very often, but I think there's nothing more exciting for a player than being able to have that moment. Let me turn my audio down just a little bit here. To have that moment where they're like, all right, describe your character, and you get to have that like little monologue to yourself where you're going through and you're describing everything that the character looks. And I think that's so key to your character building process that some people just kind of throw on the back burner and just go, okay, I got leather armor, I got a dagger, I got pants on, let's do this. It's like, no, there's a lot more to it.
Come on, right? Don't you have like maybe a special handkerchief that your mom gave you right before you went off to journey, or a special trinket from your loved one? There's always these little details we could add. You don't just have to be like, oh, it's leather, it's breeches, and we're done. It's like, okay, but, maybe you've sewn in some things to your pants, or maybe they're worn and they've got patches.
Yeah.
Get creative.
So, right. So we really wanted to look into it and kind of, deep dive and go off of some of the examples of some of the characters we've created over the years playing Dungeons and Dragons, as well as some of the just kind of tips and ideas that we came up with through not only building our own world, but also just, being in, playing Dungeons and Dragons semi-regularly. You really chalk up the hours. And so, we really kind of looked into it. And it's funny because we do have at our table a very mixed menagerie of different types of players, right? Yeah. So it's not always your person that wrote the, 8-page dissertation about how their character's background works. We have some players that, that's important, and others that it isn't. But for me, appearances always should be important because it is the first storytelling impression. I mean, to me, the reason I think the look is the most important is because, a lot of us Dungeons and Dragoners, especially my wife here, you guys love your art, right? Like, you love your character art. There's nothing more for a player than to have one of those fantastical graphical artists, shout out Entlink, to, go out and draw your character, right? So because the look is so important. Your image of your character isn't showing their backstory. It isn't showing, all their achievements, though it might. But it might also, it just shows that it's like very important to how that look kind of represents, because in essence, what we're seeing could really show their actual backstory, could show that. And so it's very important, right? The clothes, your weapon, your scars, you have hair, accessories, all of those things can tell a story for your character before you've even started the game.
Oh yeah, just think about our world, right? The real world that we live in. We think about the clothes that we wear, the accessories that we put on, even the cars that we drive, all these little things and details that we surround ourselves with to make ourselves unique and to, build our own story as we go about this life. It's the same when you're building a character.
Yeah, and so, it's really important because, like I said, it really shows, I think, that you take that extra step, right? But I think it it comes to where there is kind of the opposite, you know, and the idea being that you can make looks matter too much, and so you build too much into it, right?
Yeah,
and I think as always with everything is like, it's like you have the min and you have the max, right? And we have always theirs, and so you have to kind of find this balance of like, you're not necessarily have this incredibly scarred individual and you've created this image, but then your character is very soft spoken, they act like they've never been hurt, and it starts to create a conflict. So when you go, well, I should just be able to wear what I want, well, it's like, first you have to understand what kind of character you're really starting off with, right? And then you start from there. And so we've had a lot of, you know, kind of interesting discussions, and the one that I really wanted to start with that really changed a lot of the focus, because it actually created an entire new a new take on a race that is normally in Dungeons and Dragons, but we spun it a little bit. And the way to look at this is like, you can go even so far as just what the natural complexion and why you are a certain like color, right? So this is like, but like, so take for instance like orcs, right? So like orcs are typically green in Dungeons and Dragons, right? That's a pretty standard thing, right? And so if you change, because like we always say, flavor is free, right? So if you change this idea of like, okay, well, I'm green for a whole different reason. Like it's more of chlorophyll, right? I'm more plant-based of an orc, right? And it could be a special exemption, right? And so that to me just shows, look, it's every little step that you can look at your character. It's not, when we say appearance, we don't always just necessarily mean clothes and weapons, right? It also means, you know, everything that has to do from the entirety of when another character or another player looks at your character, what are they starting to get right off the bat? These, you know, they reinforce things like culture, backstory, class, mannerisms, everything. So you want to always look at, okay, what is the larger kind of view that my look gives, but also you don't want to have this person, you know, in an ideal world is like, if you are just this, you know, the only way to say it is like almost like, you know, a Liberace style. You are just so decked out. You are to the nines. Then obviously you also understand that that's going to play into your story as well. So you already, with your character's appearance, can you already start to affect your world as well? That's why it's so important, right? That's the biggest thing, right? So like if I create a character who obviously dresses very meager, you're going to already have your dungeon master going, okay, got it, right? Like this character doesn't want to stand out. This character doesn't want to do this. But then you're like, oh, my character's a bard. They want to be everywhere. It's like, well, how does that work? So it shows just your DM is going to see those clothes. Your DMs are going to see that, right? Exactly. As Zenling says, right? Even body language, how the character holds themselves, and they talk with big, you know, as I'm over here talking big, right? I mean, this really goes, I think, too, in this point, it really goes with dungeon masters, as hand movements are very great ways to separate your NPCs, because it's obviously tough when you're talking to multiple NPCs and they all kind of sound the same. I obviously don't have the most eclectic voice, so some of my characters start sounding the same. So, you know, having different movements, holding things, doing things, it definitely helps bring in that idea. But really, as I was starting to say, you know, what my first major tip as a dungeon master, and the philosophy that I always stress to all of my players, is flavor is always free. You know, let's go to Flavor Town when we come to building our Dungeons and Dragons characters, right? With the idea being the fact of like, look, you want to put nuance in your characters, and you also want to put it in, but it has to be stuff that's not going to actually affect the overall gameplay experience or the character themselves, right? You want to add flavor. You don't want to add so much depth that it changes the, you know, the character itself, right? So it are these little nuance, and that's, I think, where a lot of people miss opportunities, because I think when you're making your character, you're so proud of it, and you start to share every little detail, that you want to give, because you did, the edges of his cloak are sewn with gold because it's, you know, and that's awesome, great. But the problem is if it's so much and you give so much, it's starting to mechanically change the game. But if you're starting to piece it out, right, you give your general description, and then as you play later on, and this is especially if you play Dungeons and Dragons, you start to kind of give more things. Oh, well, that's, you know, hit my character's specific thing. They had that made before, or that was with them since and it's such a nuance, and it's not until it comes out, rather than it just being this listing of every single thing, because you want to add flair, but it can't you don't want to have it cost to your player, right? Or the development of the story too, because even when it comes to your looks, it can also make decisions on how other players react to you and your player, right? Like if you have a very gruff looking player, or as we call it in the community, an edgelord, you know, that look already might set people off, because it's like, but they're going, well, I have flavor, I'm adding. But at that point, it's changing the scope because you've gone too far with the idea of adding a little bit of more kind of customization. It's like the what is it, the conundrum of choice, right? Too many choices, too many things just makes people exhausted, and then they stop listening. And sometimes they'll miss your nuance, or they'll miss something that might be really important to your character and you really want them to know. But when they're bogged down in the minutia of like how many stitches are in your jacket, they're not going to pay attention.
A little too much, right? You got to think, in the normal going of the world, people don't focus on things like that. So when you ask people to focus on things like that in a fantasy setting or in a story setting, it throws them off from the realism that you're trying to bring them into for your story.
Yeah. I mean, I think a good example of this is like Molly Mock from the Critical Role Season 2. Oh, yeah. Right? That was a character where there was so much built into the character's look and imagery, but it wasn't the focus of the character. And it was used as further ways to develop the character down the line as the story comes, where it can be like, oh, hey, what's that? Explain, you know, and now it's like, oh, because it's more natural, right? Like, the way I look at it, you know, is especially, it's always funny in Dungeons and Dragons, and it's why I personally don't do the like, hey, you all met in a bar and you're all just there, you took a contract and it's good. Yeah. Because a lot of times it's this weird where it's like, I sit down and now my character theoretically is just like explaining what they look like. They, no, you want it to be more organic, right? Like as we meet people, we learn, we get more time, we start to see more nuances of their oh, that's, you know, oh, I thought that was just a regular, oh, it's no silk, it's silk because their, you know, their family has this, you know, this place, and they're the ones that now you have this multi-layer character backstory that's built around your clothes and your appearance, but by kind of piecemealing it, allowing things and making it kind of come out in pieces, a little bit of flavor, little sprinkles of MSG. It definitely helps kind of make your character feel more real and have also a lot more depth built into them as well, right? So like, it's hard to, you know, because most people, you know, like I said, they kind of shorthand the idea of like clothes matter, right? Because especially in Dungeons and Dragons, the clothing, or in essence in anything, right? Clothing is always so subjective because it's really bound by your imagination and the different styles. I mean, I don't understand what Paris is doing with clothes because half of it doesn't look like clothes. Pretty soon we're going to have like fantasy attire, but so it's tough because there is so many different ways. But I feel like if you just start attaching significance to certain aspects of clothing, whether it's the type of material or certain like flourishes or kind of engravings or certain mechanical things, I think that really kind of changes the scope of it. Not necessarily being, oh, look, this is what my character looks like, but how each piece is important to kind of what created this person to begin with, right? The hardest, I think, part of building your character is kind of explaining from your head what you visualized your character being, and then telling people exactly what it was.
Right? First impressions are important. So you want to make sure that your look matches what you're trying to portray, especially if you're doing something like Dungeons and Dragons and you have a specific goal in mind that you want to achieve. You kind of want your look to match that, right? So if you look like an edgelord villain, people aren't really going to assume that you're the good guy right off the bat. They might run away first and assume you're the bad guy. So just think about that.
Now, obviously, this is always based off of we are heavy role players, and so we like to obviously make sure we get into the headspace of our characters, and most of the players at our table does that as well. So from the context of that, we do try to play as if our characters are real breathing people in the universe and treat them as such. But obviously, if you're a more mechanical type gameplay, it may not matter as much in terms of just organizing. But, you know, it's tough to explain and just kind of give specific ideals, but it's easier to kind of give examples that we we've had that we've run into where the characters look almost really kind of describes, and if we just, quickly were to show you a photo, you automatically almost start to understand these characters, as well as kind of showing our idea is where I've had players really push the whole flavor's always free. And I think I'm going to start one. The first one I really want to point out is it's a current character we have going on right now by the name of Drexla.
Oh, yeah.
Now, this is a character who is a fairy. Now, obviously, many dungeon masters don't like flying characters, which I get. But this player wanted to be more of like an engineer, intelligence type.
Interested in the flight mechanic.
Right. It wasn't as important, right? So they instead made it where it was more of like a clockwork backpack that pseudo looked like a pair of wings. Oh, excuse me. But what it allowed is essentially change nothing to the story. Like change nothing to your character build. It wasn't adding anything necessarily to mechanically speaking. Still had the same abilities. But because of this slight visual change, when this character was seen or any art that is displayed, you instantly kind of know something about this character. It totally brings such an extra depth, and it's this idea of taking these items and giving them spins, but not so much that it actually changes, right? It's because obviously at first glance, it's still a wing. It's still a fairy that has wings that are fairy-like wings. But it's only when you start to realize more, you look into it and you go, wait a minute, is it mechanical? And then it goes into even more where it's part of her actual backstory. It's built more into her whole life. And it also causes, theoretically, an extra kind of hurdle for the character to overcome because now it's obviously something mechanical.
Yeah, it can break or it can be taken off.
Right? And so the idea being, it's like, look, this is where you take your character's concept and you're like, okay, I want to make an engineer. I want to do something like that. And you're able to spin your appearance to further show off, right? Because at the end of the day, I carry a wrench. Oh, that guy's the artificer. Like it's not really known, right? Whereas there are other the guy clad in armor, he's a knight, right? So you kind of want to have ways to show whether it's your character's profession, their class, or whether it's something particular about their backstory. You want to include it to where it can show that very simply. We'll post some pictures in our Discord, or if you're actually in our Discord, you can look at them right now because Entlink has posted a ton of art for that, as well as the player who owns Entlink. Sorry, that was weird. The player who owns Drexla has also commissioned a lot of art for her as well. So it's interesting to see the different interpretations of her. But because of that one nuanced thing, every single interpretation gives the exact same vibe. They may be different in art, but you always get this vibe that this is somebody who is more mechanically inclined and is more of kind of like a grease monkey and ready to kind of work on anything. And actually has the ability to do that. So it really just shows how taking something that theoretically is maybe putting your character at a disadvantage actually builds so much more depth in their look and as well as in their overall story design. I know you got a few that you've had personally, as you're more of a player than I am.
My favorite, though, my absolute favorite was Brenna. I thought she was fantastic because I started off with just an idea that I wanted her to be an Aasimar, but I didn't just want it to be like the fluffy white wing angel type. I wanted some difference, right? So I wanted her to be an Aasimar of Heimdall so that I could have Bifrost wings that were all sorts of colors of the rainbow, like prismatic colors, and so it was just a really cool flair that I have that I had for Brenna that I just thought was amazing. Changed nothing about her actual mechanics, it just kind of added some differences. And then for her miniature, I was able to actually paint that out and have her have like these rainbow wings in glow paint too, so they glow under UV light even. And that's not the only one. She had a steed too, and if you know anything about the lore of Heimdall, he has like a ram that's his friend. Well, I wanted a sort of steed that represented that, but there's no such steed for the actual spell in D&D. So I worked with my great dungeon master here, and he was just like, just use the goat one because it's like a similar enough stat block that it works, and just call it a ram. So we got the ram miniature and we played with that for the rest of the campaign. It was awesome.
Right, and that just goes to show again where it's like, these little kind of nuanced ways that you can change your character's appearance. really adds to it, because I think like a lot of times it's this default idea of like, well, you had a scar over the eye to make them seem rugged or rough or whatnot, but it can always be much more nuanced. And so, you know, like for example, we have a species in our world called the Canon, and they are taken from like the orc archetype, and being green, they kind of do, they absorb light, and they kind of the mixture. So it changes a lot of the world itself by changing just simple things. Now, obviously, this is as a dungeon master, not necessarily a player, because I imagine dungeon masters don't want you changing their whole world. But when speaking as a little tip to fellow dungeon masters out there, if you're listening, is, you know, it is also ways that you can change the species or the races in your worlds is the same way, right? Like you can change little appearances that will kind of shape the entire way that your players will understand and react to them. I mean, having understood that, like, here's this orc type creature, but it's green because it absorbs the sun, right? And it totally changes the entire scope. And now a player might be like, oh, well, maybe I want to be a druid orc, because now obviously they're more in tune with the grass, and that and that creates a whole new perspective for how the character is viewed, as well as the species, right? I think for me, one of the two, like the one that I really loved too, that really showed about how appearances could really change things, and was kind of the pinnacle of appearances, was, and I've talked about him in a few times, and my players really love this character by the name of Drip Drop.
He's awesome.
Now, Drip Drop is an alchemist. He's not the best, but he is one of those ones that he may not know it works, but he's over trial and error. And so he was this, you know, this small alchemist halfling who was just covered in bandoliers of vials and potions. You know, half his head was grass, the other half was various colors, because he just constantly experiments on himself. Right? So it's one of those things where it's just by a quick description alone that I just gave you, you have this idea of this chaotic creature that, without even this person saying a word, you notice so much about them, and that's really what it comes down to. What's going on, Boo Bam? You know, there's so much more personality that built into it because you went and added those little extra nuances, right? You know, I feel like hair isn't used enough in the game, and it sounds weird because look in our world, right? Look how many different variant hairstyles and designs, and it's crazy because those are bound by our natural hair laws. I mean, not that I really know much of, but it does show that there's a lot of nuance there, right? You know, we always talked about, you know, there's much more to appearance than clothing, because it's like, you know, examples of this is also about like things like height, right? So when I talk about hair, there's certain species in the world of Dungeons and Dragons that can't grow facial hair.
Not at all.
If you watch Critical Role, you know the character Grog. It's one of the funny parts because he is that particular character, right? And he grew facial hair using certain means.
Exactly.
But at the same time, why does that actually have to play into an effect? And don't, you know, you should be able to, you know, if it is something you want to be able to do, always open to your DM, because again, that's a flavor is free kind of thing. And so it is one of those things where it's like, look, you can have these crazy variants, right? You could be, you know, a dwarf who is incapable of growing a beard, right? Or what we were talking once is like, what if you were, say, a Goliath who happens to be very small. You happen to get the short gene. You're the short king of Goliath, but you're confused for being a hairless dwarf, right? There's so many nuanced ways that you can change different things. You know, it happens to be, you know, the Yao Ming of dwarf kind, and a dwarf happened to be born who was like 6'5", right? And so now he lives amongst the, you know, the humans, but he's technically, you know, and those are other things where just little changes to baseline appearances most of the time that we just kind of feel restricted to. Like, I know like Dungeons and Dragons has this horrible habit of kind of giving you too much of a box to squeeze yourself into, right? So they're like, oh, dwarves are X amount of feet. Well, we know humans come in all shapes and varieties. We're all the same species, but some of us can be 7'2", while others of us can be 3'1", right? Like, so why do we not include that thinking into building our fantasy characters and building our worlds, right? So think about that. Like, be a unusually tall halfling, or an incredibly small elf that gets confused constantly for being a halfling when they're actually an elf, right?
That'd be crazy.
Our interpretation of like the Christmas Keebler elves instead of Legolas and arrows. Different interpretations, but it changes the whole outlook of what you can see in that character. And that's why I really like to emphasize on appearance, and it's more than just the clothes and the weapons you carry, because honestly, when it comes to Dungeons and Dragons, when it comes to campaigns and stories, I feel like characters come in two kind of categories in this way. It might be a little off topic a bit. But I feel like you see characters evolve appearance wise in two ways. It's either they evolve off of what they have, right? So they keep a similar look, right? So like we have characters who it's okay, they have this armor, they get a piece, it's added to them, but it's always an extension of the character itself, right? So the characters, it's almost like their armor, their gear is a living testament to all the experiences they have, right? And that's very common. And then the second type is the more flexible, right? That is the player whose character goes through what I think is like costume changes. They have different outfits. They change their entire aesthetic. And to me, that's, I think, where the real key is. I guess a good real example would be is like looking at things like the Power Rangers. So like when the Power Rangers get new powers, it's always just an extension onto whatever they're wearing, right? They get like a special gauntlet, or they get a cowl, but it's always their color, it's always their design, it's always their look, it's always going to be the same. Whereas like we see in traditional RPGs, especially things like Diablo, where you're constantly just swapping out. I don't like these bracers, let's switch these out. Okay, now I'm wearing all ivory. Okay, nope, now I'm wearing all ebony. Now I'm wearing all blue. Now I'm wearing all this, right? And so to me, that just shows that you really also want to see how your appearance can evolve over time, because it's not also a stagnant thing either.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, I just, you're right? You want to make sure that you leave a little space for growth, a little something. And like, sorry if this is tangential, but thinking about the D&D size range, I know Drexel counts as tiny, right? How would you run it if someone wanted to play a centaur type creature? Ooh.
I mean, yeah, it's it's that same thing. Obviously, yeah, Drexel is considered tiny, which he does have his own little rule set. Yeah. Like centaur, it's that same thing. Like to me, all that does is add more to a character. I think a good example, I think there's been a few. I mean, Fern is not necessarily a centaur, right? In the Critical Role series.
No, she's a centaur.
She's a centaur, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, she's got the horseback.
Does she have that? I'm kind of thinking she was I couldn't remember if she was bipedal or if she was quadrupedal.
Oh, wait, she might be a satyr.
Yeah, I think that. But for me, like, if someone wanted to play a centaur-like creature, I mean, it's, to me, the only thing I put it as is it's more of like, how would you interact with the world more? Because obviously your anatomy and your kind of space you need takes up more when it comes to interacting with others that aren't that way. I think it would be one of those things where it's like, and it sounds terrible, like they would constantly be confused for a horse. And I already know how other players would be, is like there would be some bard player that would probably be trying to like ride or saddle that particular person.
Yeah.
But to me, I think it's funny, and I love that Entling brings this up, because we in our current campaign are nothing but like creatures that are opposite of the standard fantasy fare, right? We have one elf. And that's about it. And I really actually encourage people to play more of the monster classes. Be a bugbear, be a goblin, be a troll, because I think it gives you an even more opportunity to change appearances that normally wouldn't. It's like, you see a troll, but he's got a freaking 3-piece suit. No, you're fine, Entlink, you're fine.
I was pretty much done with my point.
But that's kind of like what we're saying.
We do. We have a drink. Come on. We have a drink. Gotta stay hydrated. Thank you, Boo Bam.
That one really blocks you off when it pops up.
It's okay.
Thank you, Boo Bam. But yeah, so I mean, for me, it's like the example like that we were kind of pondering is like, so like we posed this to you guys in chat, like, right? So like, how would you change to reflect its kind of appearance for like a ranger class? So obviously a guy who's like uses bows, lives to the forest or lives to nature. When you look at a guy who maybe lives in the swamp versus one that lives in a mountain fortress up high, right? Like you guys could even imagine, probably even if all of you chatted right now, you would all give different interpretations, none of which being incorrect, but just shows how many different variants that we can all just come up with just by thinking, okay, let's take the norm and let's find something unique to spin on top of it and then build that as our building blocks for our appearance, right? So, you know, okay, this is the uniqueness. This is what I'm going to build my appearance off of.
Right. And you can start with the similarities too, right? It's really difficult to be like, oh, well, you know, a ranger from a swamp will have these specific items to make it easier to traverse the swamp. No, so start in the center, right? A ranger will have leathers, but a ranger in the mountains might have leathers that are lined with fur, you know, to make it to make it better for the cold, things like that. So add little details as you go to make it more nuanced for what you've got.
Right. And, you know, moving a little bit further down, I also wanted to make sure to give, you know, as a lot of this as being a dungeon master for these, you know, for quite a while now, I like to also, you know, look to other dungeon masters, both popular and not, obviously, you know, all over the place. And, you know, you see a lot of different types of ways that they do things, and you try to incorporate that in not only the NPCs I create, but I think it also can be shared to players themselves as well, right? Like there's a lot you can learn from other players and other dungeon masters, right? Like, so like I always laugh because, you know, like when looking, you know, two of the two that I think that are so popular right now, but then are very opposite on how they handle appearance and how they think are Matt Mercer and Brandon Lee Mulligan, right? We're going to see even more of that here pretty soon come season 4 with Matt being, you know, an actual player consistently. That's going to be interesting to see how that plays in more with their particular styles, right? But you got like Matt, who encourages much more backstory driven looks, right? Or looks, right? Everything has to have a story to something else, right? So a good example is like Percy, right? So his weapon is towards his backstory. His look is from his, everything is built and has another tie. And that's really what a dungeon master like Matt Mercer really likes to put into his character designs, his NPCs, as well as allowing his players to do that. But then you got Brennan, excuse me, where he really lets them do whatever they want. I mean, they've had the craziest campaigns, the craziest looks, because he rewards them. He wants his players, right? So for him, the more flavor his players come in with, the more he's going to allow them to do. He encourages that. He wants the visuals to guide those RP moments, right? So you can see it, whether it's crazy goofy or super serious when you see, and that even goes to like even within his like space with the dice tray of doom and all that kind of stuff. Like those little small details really help out overall, you know. But there's other ways, like I know for you D&D, that you find ways on a player perspective and how actually of like, you know, creating a character themselves. I know that you have your own, you know, system to do that as well.
It's tough, right? When you're sitting there and you're trying to imagine all this stuff about how your character is going to look, it can be a little daunting. Especially if you're a new player at this or you're just getting into character creation. That can be so tough and a little like overwhelming. But daunting. Yeah, right. As an artist, I try to start, and I'm really trying to embody this a little more with the Hellscarred series that I'm doing and everything. But starting to do little sketches of reference points for different parts of the look that you want to go for. Right. If you like a certain type of clothing, then study it, get different, but you don't even have to draw it like I do, right? Like there's all sorts of different ways you can make a collage, put different things together to make your look more cohesive. We call them mood boards. You know, just place things together. Yeah, character boards. So that's the way you look at it, and you don't have to be some great artist or some great storyteller to really make an in-depth character. You can have tools to help you along the way.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it's one of those things where like the small details, you know, like tattoos, jewelry, or like little changes to how like your weapon or a tool might be. They really make your character memorable, but only when there's a small amount of them. When you have so many things to make you memorable, you're not very memorable because they start just not being significant. When everything is so grandiose, nothing is grandiose.
You want to build up to grandiose, right? So just imagine for a D&D campaign, you're waiting, your start at level 1, level 3, maybe level 5, but you got to get all the way to level 20. So you want to leave a little room, or
That's only us. We
only us.
Remember, statistically speaking.
Oh, I guess.
Remember, statistically speaking, almost no campaigns ever go to 20.
Oh, geez, sorry. I'm just so used to our campaign.
I have spoiled you guys, but yeah, I'm just saying most campaigns rarely reach past double digits.
For long-running campaigns, anyway, you want to give a little bit of time for all of that progression to show up, just like a normal life, right? It takes time for you to amass things.
Yeah, and I totally get that. But now, if there's anyone, we want to open it up to any Q&A. If there's any questions of anyone watching that has anything you would like answered, now is the time as we get towards the end here. But also, anytime we're online, whether it's here with me or D&D on her channel on Twitch, you can always hop in and ask Dungeons and Dragons type questions. Just let us know. We're always here, always open as long as we're online. If not, you can always join our Discord too and find us there offline. So you can always find us. But really, I think my big wrap up, my big takeaway is kind of twofold, right? It's looks, shape, first impressions, hands down, right? No one's going to be reading your sheet ever, right? Like that's your thing. So
there's no other players.
So it's going to always be you who is going to tell and give the first initial life to your character, whether you are writing a story or whether you're making a character. It's up to you to give as little or as much details as you want. But the idea is think outside the box. It is so much more. Damn, he just spent it on the hydrate.
Gotta drink that
juice. But look more than just your clothes, your weapons. Look at something even more nuanced because that's going to be more significant, right? Most of us only have a few items we hold on ourselves, right? So the idea that you are just this jangling person of just nothing but bells and whistles, it's just unrealistic, and you're gonna have a hard time having your character be taken seriously. I think my second follow-up or my takeaway on this is that, remember, flavor should always be free. You always want to, Dungeon Masters, encourage creativity. Players, please explore. Try to be things. My biggest thing is be characters that are weak, that have weaknesses, that have maybe things that may be wrong. Because that look, that image, imperfection is perfection, in my opinion.
For me, my takeaway is really just to get into your character. That's the way, right, that you make your character appear as realistic as you want it to be. If you want your character to be some wacky, out there person, you can. Just make sure that the looks match the personality and it matches the lifestyle too, right? Like, wacky people tend to be richer people because they tend to have the time to be wacky,
they
right?
get to be wacky.
But like, you're not really going to find someone who has to work for a living that has that same panache, right? So just think about that. Immerse yourself in your character and really think about what they represent and how you want them to give that first impression to people, because that's where the details are born. And that's also how you keep the details sort of centered on what you need to be, and you don't go overboard because you just focus on what you're trying to portray.
Right. And I mean, I think it really easy is like small details, big memories. So big details, not going to be remembered, guys. So that's really the thing. And it doesn't have to be a lot. It can be one thing, one item. So I know it can get sometimes stressful, but trust me, just open your mind, think outside the box, and just let your character and your creativity flow. And that's the biggest thing of all.
It's going to help you so much. Trust me.
But once again, we thank you guys all for joining us as we got back into it. I know we were gone for a while, but we are getting back into that rotation. So Lore Drop will return again in 2 weeks, and we will be back here talking even more about characters. Now, just give a little tease. Thanks to a friend of ours that we know her as Hydra. We're going to be talking about alignment next time, and talking about how, you don't have to be chaotic stupid, and you don't also have to be lawful stupid. And that there's a lot into the nuances of alignment that can be more than just, oh, I'm this. And that's the reason I do X. And so we're definitely going to be diving into that more. And I hope you guys can join us then, because I really want to get some people's takes on alignments. Because I think this is one of the issues in Dungeons and Dragons that I don't think it's ever going to be really solved, because it's not nuanced enough.
It's tough. It's really tough to have people, look that deeply into their characters.
Right.
Right. But that's going to be a wrap on tonight's dive into character looks and design. We hope that you got some fresh inspiration for your next hero, a villain, or NPC.
Yeah, whether it's the scar on the cheek, the shine to their armor, or the old boots they just refuse to replace, every choice tells a story. And don't forget, as always, flavor is always free.
If you enjoyed tonight's chat, don't forget to follow here on Twitch. Check out our Couple of Nerds Productions YouTube, and of course, hang out with us in Discord.
Somewhere, I don't know.
Somewhere, yeah. We'd love to see your character concepts and your designs, especially in our comic cave section. It's built specifically for artwork, so we'd love to see
join Antlink's art in there. She's always posting stuff. But like I said, in 2 weeks we will be continuing this series in character creation. So bring your ideas, bring your questions, and join the conversation. And once again, send us some messages on Discord. We love when you guys interact with us, because we're able to find the topics you guys want to talk about, and that's what this is all about. So thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning in. Stay
nerdy, and we'll see you next time. Bye, guys. Bye. Oh, we're gonna raid.
That's right.
We always forget to do this, so let me hit that button. Let's find us somebody to raid. Who's on? Are there any homies on right now?
Let's see.
Oh, okay. I think we're gonna raid Difto.
Oh yeah.
He's playing Jacking in the Box with Boys. All right. I'm down.
Let's do it. That'll be fun.
Let's go. All right, guys. Thank you so much. We're gonna start that raid. If you guys want to join, let him know where you're coming from. And that's the Couple of Nerds. That's us here. Thank you once again, guys, so much for joining us. And we're gonna go hang out with Difto for a little bit, and see you guys next time. Whoa! Your ego coming in this way.